What was the dumbest thing you've ever been asked by a customer? 1. I used to work in a pet store. One night a woman came in and said she had ordered a puppy off the internet and he would be arriving in the next few days. She had never owned a pet and asked several dumb questions, but the one that I'll always remember is, do puppies need water? 2. A woman came to the checkout and handed me a bag of mozzarella. She asked me what the ingredients were and if there were any chemicals in it. I turned the bag around and started to read the ingredients out to her. She grabbed the bag out of my hand, angrily said, I could have done that myself, and stormed off. 3. I used to work in IKEA in the section which sold wardrobes. Normally around 6 foot long and 60 kilograms in boxes. Customers would regularly ask me would it fit in their car. After being polite the first few times, asking them about the size of their car and guessing, I then just started asking them what color their car was. The amount of people who'd answer unfazed was amazing. 4. I used to work in a phone shop. Had someone come in asking why their phone wasn't working properly. It was visibly scorched and melted. I asked why it looked that way. They said, it came up with an error message saying it had been too cold. Not an error message I had heard of before, but I know phones can bring up errors for being too hot, so who knows, and so they had put it under the grill to heat it up. The grill. Their first point of call was to cook it. I said, that's why their phone wasn't working, and no, it was not covered under the guarantee. 5. When I was a teenager I had a customer try to fight me because we didn't do the Taco Tuesday discount for him. It was the weekend. 6. When I worked in a call center for home phone service, I had a guy call and angrily ask why we were still charging him for his phone service, since he had unplugged his phone from the wall a month ago. 7. Many years ago I worked at Home Depot. One time I had a customer come up and ask me how to access the parking lot that's on the roof. I told him that we didn't have a parking lot on the roof. He didn't believe me, got super angry, and stormed out of the store to look for the access to the rooftop parking lot. 8. I worked at a hat store and a guy asked if he could shrink his hat by microwaving it. I said no. He came back 2 days later to return his hat after microwaving it. Problem was there was a hole in the front of it because brewers' hats are made with metallic threading. He microwaved his brewer's hat and blew a hole in it. 9. What time do you close today? We're open 24/7. Oh great. And what time do you close tomorrow? 10. Used to work at a car parts store. Customer walks in and asks if vegetable oil was better than regular engine oil and what all it was on. What's a rule your parents had that you thought was silly at the time and still can't quite understand? 1. My father installed a tetherball game in our backyard. We weren't allowed to play it because we would ruin the grass. It hung there for years and we just stared at it from the porch. 2. If you asked to do something the answer was always no. If you didn't ask it was 95% of the time allowed with maybe a few questions. 3. My mom prohibited using the washing machine between Christmas and New Year's. She believed it would bring bad luck in the family in the following year. Never made sense in any way, just a superstition. When I finally moved out it was a really big deal for me to finally be able to wash my clothes in that time period. And as expected, my family was fine the year after. 4. My mom was extremely wary of anything related to magic. She wouldn't allow us to have cats because she thought they were evil. One time my cousin got me a history of magic book for Christmas and it got confiscated and it was never seen again. I tried to sneak and play D&D in high school. She found out and banned me from the after-school club. She's not religious or anything, she just doesn't think it's a good idea to mess with magic. 5. I wasn't allowed to shower until my homework was done. But I also wasn't allowed to shower past 7 p.m. So between getting home from school, homework, eating dinner etc. 6. I wasn't allowed to watch any type of TV. I'm talking no movies, even Disney movies, cable, anything. I had to secretly watch X-Files with my dad on the weekend when my mom didn't know. Yet my mom let me play video games. I still don't get that one. 7. My grandma didn't like me watching TV while I was on my bed. Why did she put a TV in my bedroom then? 8. When we have guests over you either sit down quietly or go upstairs. Adults aren't here for you. Don't talk to them. I still can't comprehend not allowing your children to have a conversation with your friends. 9. When I was 11 I wasn't allowed to buy a black bathing suit. No reason given. When I was 12 and bathing suit shopping, my mom suggested this black one. I said I'd try it but asked when the no black bathing suit rule changed, and she denied there had ever been such a rule. So I guess she couldn't understand the rule either even though it was her rule. 10. No watching sci-fi because my mom did not like it. She could have just not watched it, she wasn't watching anything else in the same time. 11. My mother arbitrarily declared that I couldn't wear shorts unless it was 75 degrees Fahrenheit outside. Still makes me mad when I think about it. 12. I wasn't allowed to wear headphones or listen to music in the house. My mother's reasoning was that it was a sign of depression and she didn't want to see it. What is your "this person has no idea how the real world works" moment? 1. A friend of mine saw a guy getting arrested in college. Kid was struggling and cussing out the cops like crazy. Do you know who my father is? A cop humored him and asked. He owns the #1 used car dealership in upstate New York. We were in Massachusetts. They were unimpressed by his legacy and took him in. 2. Guy sold his Rent-A-Center TV and couldn't understand why they threatened to charge him for theft. 3. My cousin and I were talking one day and I mentioned that I had a horrible sense of direction where my brother could be dropped off in a cornfield and find his way home. She replied that it was easy to find your direction, just remember never eat shredded wheat and you will know where north is. I laughed and said that was for remembering the directions in order, not for finding which way was which. We argued for 20 minutes till I told her to show me how it works. She stands up and points forward, and says never eat shredded wheat, and points to the direction she was facing when she stood up. That's north. So I told her to face me and then find north. She does it again. Never eat shredded wheat, and points at me and says, that's north. So ask her if north just changed. She says no. But north was that way a minute ago? She looks confused and says, why didn't that work? I told her it was because she was an idiot. 4. First day at college, girl next to me raising her hand and waiting for the RA to call on her asks, what time will the cleaning services be cleaning our rooms? Man, did she make me feel better. I was poor and got a scholarship. I was so stressed I'll do something stupid first, but she totally jumped on that fire for me. 5. Someone I know bought a house and expected Wi-Fi to be included with the house. 6. This kid at my school thought taxes weren't real and just a story. The tax fairy. 7. Met a guy at uni who thought Chinese people would be unaffected by the rise of superbugs because they were too smart to fall victim to it. Both a pharmacy student and a Chinese person could not convince him otherwise. What are subtle red flags at a job interview that say working here would suck? 1. I brought up a company's awful Glassdoor reviews and they got so mad they ended the interview. I guess I dodged that bullet. 2. When you ask, what do you like about working here, and the interviewer talks about the location of the job, it's a great place to live, instead of the actual job. 3. I didn't know it at the time, but you'll be wearing many hats was a sign that they were going to give me the work of 4 positions and the wage of 1. I didn't last a year there before I left, and now I won't even finish reading job ads that include that line. 4. I once turned down a job offer because they mentioned that the previous person in the position had quit after a few months, and most of the people I interviewed with seemed stressed out. 5. They said, we only want the best of the best. Me, how much are you paying? Minimum wage. 6. You are required to wear clothing that has the company logo. You must purchase it yourself. From the company. 7. You'll get full-time hours but won't be full-time. AKA we'll do everything in our power to avoid giving you benefits even though we have you working more than 40 hours in a week. 8. I came in for a job interview at 7:30 p.m. The entire staff was still in the office. Should have known right then that 9 to 5 was not ever going to happen. One day I worked until 2:30 a.m. to finish up a big project, and my boss said to me I could come in an hour later the next morning. Gee, thanks bro, with my public transport/travel time that gives me a solid 2 hours of sleep instead of just the 1. 9. We don't like clock watchers here. We expect everyone to be committed. Expecting more work for no extra pay. Getting mad at you when you leave at 5 even though your stated work hours end at 5. 10. Everyone looks tired, also you don't see anyone in your department before working in it other than the boss. Made this mistake a few times. 11. When you are signing all the forms they give you and you are taking your time to read over every document, so that you can fully understand what you are getting into, and people come in and start telling you that you don't need to read and tell you to just sign here. 12. Had an online interview with a company a few years ago. Was interviewed by the regional manager, seemed like a normal interview. Halfway through, he let slip that there were 6 other people from his company watching and listening in, but the software was set up so I could not see or hear them. And he actually got a kick out of telling me this. 13. When they tell you, what I'm paying you stays between you and me, don't discuss pay with anyone else, usually means they are trying to pay you less than your coworkers who do the same job and don't want you to know. 14. The overtime isn't mandatory, but most folks stick around after hours most days. Spoiler, the overtime is mandatory. People who've seen someone get fired on the first day, why were they fired? 1. Was in the local Walmart needing to take a leak. Walked into the bathroom to a manager and employee staring down a stall covered in poop. The manager was explaining to the dude that cleaning poop is in the job description. The guy responded, well, I'm sorry that this is my first day, but F that, and walked out. 2. The afternoon of his first day as a developer, he was noticed downloading the source code of our main product app from the source control system to a personal USB stick. Said he wanted to take it home and mess with it in his spare time. 3. On my first day at Target, another new hire jokingly jumped into the cardboard compactor, and the boss sent him packing instantly. It wasn't on or anything, they just have a zero tolerance policy when it comes to stuff like that. We'd been on the job for less than an hour, so he made something like $6 total while working there. 4. New substitute teacher fired on day 1 for writing, "Be quiet" in Sharpie on 2 kids' foreheads. 5. I hired a temp for data input. Her first day a guy pulled me aside and said, she can't be here. Apparently one of our full-time employees had a restraining order against her. I sent the employee home and apologized, then called her agency and told them she was not welcome back. Not sure what the order was for, but my guess is stalking. 6. Dishwasher pooped his pants then kept washing dishes. 7. First day, IT guy made his computer's desktop wallpaper a Facebook pic of a female coworker he had just met. 8. I was a bartender and it was his first day of training. He smacked my butt when I was bent over to get ice. I flipped out on him and he got fired in front of me. 9. Guy at fast food place showed up drunk and 3 hours late. Then he didn't clock in, just started working. When the manager asked him to clock in he yelled. She was a tiny lady so she called in another manager to help fire him. 10. Fighting with a customer by getting in their face and yelling at them. The idiot thought the company owed him loyalty for being an employee. Oh boy, wait until he learns. 11. I've worked at a daycare for the past 15 years. One girl that got hired got fired within 1 hour by calling the babies, things, and screaming out stuff like, "How do I shut this thing up?" or, "Damn it, these things smell so bad." I kicked her out of the classroom after 10 minutes of this. I'd much rather have been by myself, and she was found laying on the break room table playing on her phone. I never saw the HR people get to my center so fast. 12. I fired a man on the first day for incompetence. I work in IT. He claimed to have years of experience, but even after I showed him how to edit a text file in Notepad, he couldn't do it. What are American things that Americans don't realize are just in America? 1. Having the restaurant take your credit card. In most countries it's considered impolite to disappear with the card as they might write the digits down to charge extra later. Therefore they normally bring a portable terminal to your table so you can keep the card in eyesight and have the optional tip actually charged when the card is run and not added after the fact. Edit. It's been pointed out in several comments that it isn't just rude, it's downright scary for your card to disappear. In the US we have to trust it will come back, and if the charge doesn't match what you expect, you just file a complaint with the credit card company for a correction. 2. Absurdly long election campaigns. In most countries I've been to, election campaigns last a month or two. In the US they seem to go for a full year. 3. Red Solo cups. My European cousins asked me if parties in the US really had those red cups. 4. Nearly everything about their high schools. 5. Parking lot size. I've been to about 20 different countries all over the place, and I have never seen a standard Walmart-sized parking lot anywhere out of America. 6. Unused vacation days. And how proud people are of not using them. 7. Redditors know, but I wasn't aware that we are the only country with ads for prescription drugs. 8. I want to say for-profit prison systems. These things are fucked up. If the state doesn't keep up the prisoner quota, they gotta pay a fine to the company that owns the prison. So this basically makes them try to keep existing prisoners. 9. The use of the words junior, sophomore and senior in school. I don't think I have ever heard these outside of an American TV show or movie. 10. People who angrily do not want healthcare. 11. Massive gaps on all sides of toilet cubicle doors, like why even bother with a door at all when people can see through so easily. 12. The sink blenders. 13. Assuming that everyone on the internet is American until proven otherwise. 14. Measuring distances by time rather than actual distance. Like, yeah, the store is 20 minutes away instead of 10 miles. 15. I saw a post in another subreddit that said, "Just paid off my student loan debt with a medical lawsuit claim." Didn't need to guess where they were from. 16. Free refills at restaurants. 17. Bumper stickers. They're a lot less common in Europe anyway, not sure about the rest of the world. 18. Flags, everywhere. 19. Massively long advertisement breaks. 20. I listen to an America podcast and the hosts say, "Oh, that's 'cause we are Scottish because of whatever," without having any family directly being from that country but meaning their heritage going way back. Weird. What's the biggest public tantrum you've ever personally seen from an adult? 1. I watched the CEO of a company I worked at start screaming and stomping his feet because people weren't listening to his band at a company event, and instead were mingling at the bar. He literally shouted, "This is my party. This is my company. This is my favorite band." I just started laughing. 2. In my youth I worked in a little gift shop. A well-dressed elegant couple in their 40s came into the shop one day during the Christmas season, with an ad in hand for a certain item. We had sold out of the item and they yelled at me demanding I order a new one for them or it was false advertising. I was timid back then, so I just quietly explained that it was a limited lot, which was stated in the ad, and we couldn't order any more. This enraged the woman. She actually stamped her foot and said we had ruined her Christmas. Up to that point I was annoyed and a little scared of their over-the-top anger. But when she stamped her foot I burst out laughing. Seeing a grown woman do that was just so absurd. Especially when the item in question was an angel figurine on sale for $5.99. 3. Dude at Walmart in 2003 had a complete meltdown over his spiral notebooks ringing up at 30 cents a piece instead of the 25 cents that was listed on the sign. Composition notebooks were 25 cents, someone put those spirals back on the shelf in the wrong spot. He did the whole shebang. Even shouted, "You don't know who you're dealing with," while his teenage daughter begged him to stop. The cashier started crying. First time I've ever seen someone trashy enough to get thrown out of a Walmart. 4. I had a flight delayed 13 hours once. Here was a procession of adult tantrums towards the customer service counter. It got so bad the airline had police come and stand next to the counter and deal with the verbally abusive ones. 5. My uncle yelling at me when I was 5. He couldn't stand the fact that I was sitting next to my aunt in the restaurant, when he wanted to sit next to her. 6. I witnessed a man throw his entire suitcase down an escalator over a cancelled flight. Luckily no one else was on it, but I did wish he'd fallen down after it. 7. My brother's first wife, we were shopping in Safeways and she wanted some chocolates and my brother told her no. She sat on the floor and started to wail like a toddler. 5 feet 2 inches, 200 pounds woman crying her eyes out sat in a fetal position. 8. A new temp was fired so he got his stuff from the break room and walked out of the building punching holes in the walls and ripping down posters and destroying anything he could get his hands on. All of it came out of his paycheck and my boss and us were laughing that his check came out to something like 30 cents for a full week of work. Which older names will not become popular again? 1. Gay, for girls. And Gaylord for boys. I've known at least one of each but they are much older. 2. I feel like nobody is gonna be naming their kid, Karen, for quite a while at least. 3. My great-grandfather born in 1923, was named Elmo. It's now my middle name. I have never heard of another Elmo, even though the Lil Red Guy himself was named after a person. 4. My grandma's middle name, was Dorcas. 5. I don't see Adolf making a comeback. Or, it's a choice. 6. Hubert. 7. Judas is not a very common name anymore. 8. Nimrod. 9. Homer, Bartholomew, and Herbert. Simpsons and Family Guy made sure no one would want to name their sons that. 10. Ebenezer. It's associated with one literary character and has been for well over a century. Kind of a shame that people forget he ultimately reformed. 11. I want to say Wolfgang, but it's such a cool name I hope I'm wrong. 12. My dad's name is Errol. Only one by that name I've ever met. 13. Isis. It's a beautiful name of an Egyptian goddess, ruined. 14. Gertrude. 15. Horace. 16. Engelbert. Yes, the UK has a singer called Engelberg Humperdinck. 17. Lance. I never hear about anyone named Lance these days. In the past people used to be called Lance a lot. 18. Fanny. This is a super common name in Sweden. Since I moved here I always giggle when I hear it. 19. Kermit. It's crazy to think Kermit was a regular name before the frog. 20. In the UK. Boris. One prime minister and too many memes has killed that name. What outrageous demands have your relatives made? 1. A relative told me they wanted to buy my house but didn't have the money to pay for it right away. They suggested that I transfer the ownership to them first, and in the meantime, I could keep living there but would need to pay them rent every month. Once the rent added up to the cost of the house, they would then give me the money for the house. 2. It's not about money. I had only been married for a little over a year, and my wife was nearly 3 months pregnant when her aunt, a distant relative, so distant that I'm not even sure how we're related, suggested that my wife go on a blind date with her boss's son. If it weren't for my wife stopping me, I would have seriously lost my temper. 3. Someone in my village heard that I was studying computer programming and asked if I could write a software program to transfer money from the bank into their own account. I was stunned into silence for a good 3 minutes before I could even respond. 4. It wasn't a relative, but my own father, who asked me to take out a high-interest loan to help his friend with some financial trouble. After I hung up the phone, I took a leave of absence from work, bought a train ticket, and went home. If my mom hadn't stopped me, I would have cracked my dad over the head with something. After pressing him, I found out he had already borrowed $10,000 from my aunt to help his friend. I dragged him to his friend's house, got the money back, and returned it to my aunt. I also gave my aunt a piece of my mind. She's a widow, and her only son had died suddenly at 30. Instead of guarding her savings, she risked it all to help my dad's friend. Absolutely reckless. That evening, I called all the relatives, telling them that my dad had fallen for a pyramid scheme and warned them not to believe anything he said about money. If they got tricked, they could deal with it themselves. I wasn't getting involved. I took the early morning train back to work. This happened in 2015, and I had only been working for a few years at the time. As my mom put it, she had never seen me so angry, cursing so loudly, and I even smashed 2 cups. She said I was no longer the obedient child she knew, but at least she wasn't worried about me getting bullied while living alone anymore. 5. Can it count if a relative didn't even ask but just took what they wanted? One of my cousins got married, and at the reception that night, he drank too much and was carried back to his new bedroom by a few people. The next morning, he woke up to find his $200,000 Patek Philippe watch missing. He reported it to the police and posted about it on social media. A few days later, I heard from my dad that another relative had taken the watch while my cousin was passed out on his wedding night. The relative returned it to him, jokingly saying, "I just thought your watch looked nice and wanted to borrow it for a few days. But I forgot, so why did you have to report it to the police?" So if my cousin hadn't reported it, were you planning to forget about it forever? 6. This happened to my cousin. One of my uncles needed money for his business and asked my cousin to lend him some. My cousin replied, "I don't have any money." My uncle immediately said, "Then go to the bank and get a loan." My cousin responded, "Why don't you go to the bank for a loan?" He answered, because I'd have to pay it back. My cousin hung up the phone. Later, he called me, asking for money. I told him I was abroad and couldn't lend money to someone in the U.S. He said, then ask your friends or classmates to lend me the money. I replied, my friends and classmates in the U.S. are all paying off mortgages. They don't have any money. He then said, well, tell them to mortgage their houses for a loan. I asked, why don't you mortgage your own house? He replied, if I mortgage the house, where will I live? I blocked him right after that. 7. My second aunt asked to borrow my passport. She said she needed it to secure a loan, and the money would be used to repay the debt she owed my family. 8. A relative asked to borrow $80,000. I replied, somewhat sarcastically, sure, I'll sell my new house, then sell my new car, and if I hold off on getting married, I can use the dowry to make up the rest? He replied, great, you should be able to get the money together in a week, right?